First of all, he's born in Sweden. He has a wife and 2 kids. He's a New York Times bestseller, very prolific writer. He writes a lot for Swedish magazines and periodicals. He wrote A Man Called Ove, which was made into a movie in Swedish with subtitles. Then someone rewrote it and republished it for an American audience called A Man Called Otto. So you might have seen that movie. And it's kind of a coinkydink in our roster of books because the lead character, or the star in A Man Called Otto is Tom Hanks. And if you remember, Tom Hanks was the narrator for The Dutch House, which was our first book. And of course, a big friend of Anne Patchett's, who recommended this book as well. So it all kind of went in a circle. He's published in more than 40 countries, translated all over the place. Are you going to try and turn on the fireplace?
Yeah, I'm gonna lift up.
She's going to do it.
Okay, great. Thank you. In interviews, Bachman's really self-deprecating. He was talking about his dedication. Do you remember the dedication? It was
What temperature?
to anyone who is young and wants to create something, do it. He wanted people to think, I could do this. If this guy, I could finish something. If this moron could finish this book, so could I. So I thought that was kind of funny. I had a strange reaction when I read My Friends for the first time. The second time I was kind of prepared. I found it deeply moving. Those teenagers, the train wreck of their home lives, the fact that they were abandoned, I mean, it was just awful. And then at the same time, parts of it, I was laughing out loud. So it was hilarious. It's kind of a comedic tragedy. So it's an oxymoron, but very unusual. At the same time, I'm going to say scattered without, I'm going to say every other page was full of deep wisdom, unbelievable insights into so many things, but at the same time using very, very simple prose. Nothing really fancy, nothing unusual. My Friends covers themes such as friendship, the friendship between all those teenagers, definitely impact of trauma you saw in Jor's life, the impact of the trauma on him and how these same things are multi-generational. There's also strong hope themes going through, the healing power of art, lots and lots of memorable passages. And that's one thing I'm going to be doing today that I don't normally do. I'm going to be reading from the book a little bit because of the passages were I found them just so amazing. Let me read one to you. He was asked, the train had stopped, and remember many times he was thinking of leaving Louisa behind. And so at this time he was, but then before he left, she asked him, do you miss not living in the artist's beautiful home now that he's passed? And he answered, I could never have lived there without him. I would just have lain awake all night waiting for him to come home. I would have to throw away all the eggs because he was the only one who ate them, but I would have forgotten not to bow them. I would have forgotten that he didn't exist all the time. I would have forgotten that he didn't, or I would have gotten angry the light in the bathroom was turned off because I used to get so annoyed with him for always leaving it on. I would have saved all his shoes, all his shirts, and I would have been angry with the spring and hated flowers when they appeared because they drowned out the last smells of him. I would have always laid the table for 2 on the balcony. I would have had to eat all the popcorn myself. I would never have been able to pick a film. And when I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, that is exactly, when I've lost somebody, that's exactly how I felt. Exactly. So, I was just so impressed with that, and all those passages like that. And it also, the characters in this novel, someone was saying that the novel kind of repeats itself, and it definitely does. The kids on the pier, and funny jokes about farts and all this kind of stuff. It's very repetitive, except that every single anecdote adds something to the characters. It deepens our understanding, kind of in the same way that art is made. And, Bachman has a deep relationship with art, clearly. My dad was an artist who painted in oils, and I remember going into a studio one day and you'd see a white canvas and there'd be these pencil lines on it, kind of outlining a forest or a tree or a mountain or a stream. So it just looked like a bunch of pencil lines on this white canvas. Next day, you go in and there'd be green blobs of paint that looked like nothing. And then the next day you go and the green blobs would have more colors of green or blues and things in it. And then the next day you go and it's a three-dimensional forest. So it was this layered approach, and that's how I feel Bachman develops his characters, in this layered approach. Our main character, I couldn't really pick a main character in this. I think I'm going to put together because there isn't really a main character, but I had to pick one. I would say a pivotal character is Sejat. And so I am totally screwing this up. Oh yeah, let's try passage. So this slow character reveal. It was a baby had come on board. Sorry, I can't read this. A baby had just come on board, and we hear Ted talking, and he says, "A passenger has just sat down with the baby," and we hear Ted thinking, "Dear Lord, he hardly likes people, and of course babies are the worst functioning versions of people. What exactly does she want from him? Everyone likes babies, Ted," Louisa repeats, as if that would make it any more true. Ted folds his arms, worried that if he doesn't, she might make him touch it. Louisa, on the other hand, leans across the aisle and makes faces at it, causing it to laugh. Obviously, the artist would have done the same thing if he'd been there, because he liked children too, the lunatic. One time he told Ted that even wild animals were careful with newborns, that it's a biological instinct, because babies are what remind us that life goes on. Babies teach us not to be scared of death. That's how we realize we can't wish for eternal life, because if no one died, we'd have to ban all new people from being born. And when the playgrounds are empty, when the last pair of rain boots has been grown out of, when the last puddle has been jumped in, what would we want eternity for then, Ted? So we learn so much about this artist after even though he's died already, and it's this layered approach as all the way through. Ted, as the storyteller, is telling all these little anecdotes about the artist, and so we get that development of character. Now, our story is unusual in that when he first started writing this book, he did not have the present tense. So Louisa didn't exist, and none of that current stuff. So it was all the before, the 4 teenagers, and their experiences in school, which were horrible, their experiences at home, which was horrible. So it was hugely traumatic, very dark, very depressing. And Bachman's wife read it and said, "This is not going to sell, and you can't write a book like this. You have to have some redemption and some hope." So he rewrote the book, adding the present tense. And so we're not present for the violence as much, and there is this hope and redemption and the healing power. And he does this through this whole storyline. So our story starts with Louisa in the present. She's a homeless 18-year-old growing out of the foster care system, or aging out of the foster care system. And she's lost the only person she ever cared about, Fish, who was kind of her lifeline. And Bachman says she was her human. He uses that phrase many, many times. She's been given the painting of the sea, and it's a work of art, that she sort of had as her anchor, going from foster home to foster home, remember on the postcard, but now she's the owner of it. She's hooked up with 40-year-old Ted, who has lost someone too, and he was there in both streams, we'll call it, the past and the present. So he was there 25 years ago when all this was happening, and when the painting was conceived of and developed, and he was there with the artist at the beginning, and he was also there with the artist at the end when he died. And now he's stuck with Louisa, and still the artist in a way, because he has the artist's ashes that he has to figure out what to do with. And so it's complicated by the fact that Louisa has been given this painting which is worth a fortune, and the artist's death was unexpected, but still he'd been sick for a long time. The complication of Ted having to deal with Louisa is not expected at all. So Ted is adorable, and he's heartbroken, and he's utterly unprepared to face the world without his human, which is the artist, and he's also unprepared to face the world with Louisa, whatever she is to him, because he can't seem to shake her, even though he wants to, sort of wants to. So he does the only thing he can do. He tells her a story, and the story of the painting, and the artist, and the story of friendship, and the story really of one painting in particular that changed the direction of their lives and the direction of so many people's lives that he couldn't even predict. So that's what I thought. I want to hear what you thought. So I'd like to go around at the time of life or whatever that you're reading something that changes your reaction to it. But just picking up on what you were saying, it's interesting that how he fleshes out these characters, because in the beginning, when we're presented with this artist dying, he's a beloved artist, world-renowned, not quite 40. That's a tragedy. I mean, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But we're not that sad, really, because we don't know him.
Mm-hmm.
It's only as Bachman tells us more and more all through the book, that layered approach, that now that tragedy, we keep feeling it over and over again, that he's passed. And that's like traumatic, was traumatic for me, constantly reading about that. And the fact that the book is filled with all those broken people. But as Ted was near his, at the end of his story, really, telling about the artist, this is a reaction that I sort of had. Louisa said, Ted says to her, she's crying about the story, and Ted says, it's 25 years ago, Ted says, as if he's trying to convince himself that it's nothing to cry over. Louisa sobs furiously. Not for me. I wasn't there. For me, it's happening now. And I think that's sort of what he does. Let's get into small groups here. We'll go from Sue over. That'll be one group, if you can kind of swing yourselves around a bit. And then, I don't know how you're going to do this, but some friends, one of the central themes is friendship. So that didn't take much of a scholar to find out. He takes a deep dive into friendship, the aspects of friendship, loyalty, the importance of found family. Now, all of us have friends, most of us have family, and some of us are lucky enough to have found friends, people who have become our family, either through circumstances or just over the passage of time. They're like our brothers and sisters. They're a piece of us now. The artist, Jor, Ted, Ali, they were found family. That whole last summer of their childhood, when they turned 15, sharing all their silly Bart jokes and all that kind of stuff, they had found their family. The artist would remember being 14 as a feeling like he was always homesick, because he realized that as an adult, that was what the emptiness in his chest was. Some of us are born in the wrong place. The whole of our childhood is like being shipwrecked on a desert island. We ache with the homesickness without knowing what home is yet. That's all childhood friends are. People stuck on the same island. If you find a single one of them, you can cope with almost anything. And that is what they do. They protect each other. In Jor with his fists, he was always defending the artist. And they all watched out for Ali. Ted bringing the cookies for the artist. Their friendship isn't really perfect, but it becomes a safe place for them, sort of a haven where they can be themselves. And that group becomes kind of a chosen family. Fills in emotional gaps for them that were left by their real families. The artist, when he's in the alley at the beginning of the book, when he runs into Louisa, and then he tells Ted later about Louisa, and he says, she's one of us. And I think the point Bachman's making about family and friendship was very, very powerful. And these people, he would feel, became each other's humans, as he calls it. Now, one point when I was reading, I do not know the answer to this, and I'm counting on all of you ladies to help me, was nagging. He says, remember Jor knew that the artist would not survive in that environment. He had to become famous, he had to get out of there somehow. And so he developed that whole thing, or found a contest that the artist could be in, and he knew that that was absolutely essential. And he says, Jor looked down at the ground and really did try not to say anything else. But the ultimate expression of love is nagging. We don't nag anyone the way we nag the people we love. So I do nag my husband, who I do love. And I have nagged my children, although I try not to. But I would nag a close friend, but I would never nag someone I just met. So I don't know, is this true? I used to think that nagging was what blew families up. You know, my girlfriends became estranged from their mother because she was a nagger. So I don't know, I want to just have a group discussion. Are you a nagger? Does it work? Got any tips? What do you think about nagging? He really delves into this a lot because there is so much grief, there's so much trauma, and there's so much loss. Ted loses the artist. Louisa loses Fish. And each of the characters loses that promise of a safe childhood with kind and loving parents. That just doesn't happen. And I was kind of struck with the intimacy that he writes about loss and grief. He says, grief is a selfish bacteria. It demands all of our attention. He's thought so many times as an adult that it's a lie that people are scared of being alone, because what we fear is being abandoned. You can choose to be alone, but no one chooses to be left. And this is Ted talking about what it was like for him when the artist died. Ted's chest hurts, like crying without oxygen, because grief does so many strange things to people, and one of those things is that we forget how to breathe, as if the body's first instinct is to grieve itself to death. Soon Ted will stand up and discover that he's forgotten how to walk too. That happens to us all when the love of our life falls asleep for the last time. Because when the soul leaves the body, evidently the last thing it does is to tie our shoelaces together. In the weeks that following death, we trip over thin air. It's the soul's fault. And I know when my dad passed away when I was a teenager, and I had to go see the guidance counselor because I was acting out. And I remember her, she's a nun, this little miniature shriveled up nun. She said, Kathleen, what you have to do is when you walk in a room, any new room, you have to breathe in and breathe out. And I thought, she's right, I would be forgetting to breathe, you know, and that is, so one of the only horrible thing about aging, that I think, not gray hair, not wrinkles, doesn't matter, it's losing people. I think that's the hard part, and we've all lost a lot of people. Have you experienced any grief or loss?
Yeah,
sort of skate through till they're 45 or so, but yes, many people lose grandmothers or whatever. Do you feel he kind of hit this on the head? Like, what did you think about his thoughts on, did he capture grief for you? Can we get into our little groups again? Bachman really talks about how art is their savior, really, particularly painting in this novel, but it can offer solace and it can help resolve trauma, and it also provides a sense of hope and meaning. Certainly the painting did, of the sea did. He says, art is what we leave of ourselves and other people. Remember Louisa carrying the postcard around from the painting? It was a postcard of the painting of the sea, from foster home to foster home, and that was really her lifeline. And she had written that from her mother. She certainly had never expected to meet the artist, and she certainly had never expected to own the actual painting that was priceless. And the more she learns about that painting, she kind of feels and the artist, she feels she's a bit of a kindred spirit to the artist. I know people express a lot of anxiety about art. A little, I'm going to call it a tradition I have at my cottage, is that when you come and stay overnight for the first time, I have little unpainted birdhouses, and you have to paint a birdhouse and leave it in my tree. Which sounds pretty innocuous until you're faced with the birdhouse and the painting, and then grown women and grown men, I can't paint, I'm not an artist, I can't draw. I mean, it's for a bird, right? So it's not that hard, but I think we've all been in the situation. Remember Owl, the art teacher who humiliated the artist, and then when the artist got together with Christian, the janitor, and painted that wall, remember? And Owl specifically made sure that it got painted over and whitewashed. I think maybe it hasn't been a teacher, maybe it's been a critic, whatever, maybe someone critical of us, maybe somebody who nagged us, I don't know. But we have anxiety around art. And it's too bad, really, because he says art doesn't need critics. Art has enough enemies already. Art needs friends. And it got me thinking that art is all around us, really. It's not just, I have a design firm, and so when I think of art, I think of a picture on the wall. But it's not a picture on the wall. I mean, it could be a collection of teaspoons or t-shirts that you have. It could be making fabulous cakes for us and presenting them beautifully on plates. It could be flower arranging. It could be dancing. It could be needlepoint that you do, whatever it is. We're all artists in our own way, in some way. And in interviews, Bachman talks directly about his writing and the fact, well, writing is an art form, and he says that writing is his coping mechanism. And I know research says engaging in any sort of visual expression results in the reward pathway of the brain being activated, which means that you feel good and it's perceived as a pleasurable experience. I think art, whether you're baking or preparing beautiful foods or meals or whatever it is, or some people are incredibly stylish in the way they dress. You always say you're out there, but you have an artistic expression in the way you dress, Rita, and everybody has their own form of art. But participating in that, I think, lets you focus deeply. It makes you stay in the moment while you're doing it and be fully present. And I think it sort of erases the sense of time and space, or it can. I know it lowers stress. Apparently, when you are engaged in art, in any form, even painting birdhouses, it lowers the cortisol levels. And cortisol is a hormone in your body that kind of pumps you up, gets ready to fight, you know, it's a stress hormone. And so it can help you become more mindful and living in the now. George says, I'm going to have a normal life. I'll work in the harbor, get up every morning and feel like shit. Be angry all the effing time. But every so often, on an effing Sunday, I'll go to some museum somewhere, and deep inside, there'll be a painting by a world-famous artist. And it'll be so beautiful that I can cope with being alive for one more week.
That's a normal life.
Sorry?
That's a normal life.
It's normal for him,
Exactly.
living in the terrible circumstances he lives. No, not for us, for sure. As an artist, or as an adult, the artist would be told that great artistry is something that has to find its way out of a person. But for him, it was always something that needed to find its way in. Because for him, art was love, grief, a story. So what's your relationship to art? What's your art?
What's your most?
Really connected with Ted. He was my favorite. I know he wasn't really the main character necessarily, but he was my favorite. He was the quiet person, sort of did his best to hold everybody and everything together, even though, and he was always sacrificing, even though other people didn't really necessarily reciprocate. He had kind of a quiet, nervous energy to him. I found him very, very funny. He still did all the hard things, even though others couldn't or wouldn't. And when Louisa asked him where he would like his ashes scattered, I felt that his answer kind of summed everything up for me. Sort of my life, you know. Where do you want your ashes scattered then? Ted thinks for a good while before deciding. In a library. You don't have to put up with reality there. It's as if thousands of strangers have given away their imaginary friends. They're sitting on the shelves and calling to you as you walk past. There's an author called Donna Tartt who describes why a person falls in love with art. It's a secret whisper from an alleyway. Psst, you, hey kid, yes, you. That's what libraries feel like for me. Louisa had to pretend to have seawater in her eyes like that. How many damn books have you actually read? Not nearly enough. So I love that as a book lover. I thought that was amazing. And I just love that about Ted. So I'm glad you mostly enjoyed the book. I think that's great. What's coming up?